this is an iHeart podcast. Guaranteed human.
Rich, I got a question for you. What's the most romantic thing that you've done for your wife?
This is hella corny, but I studied abroad in Florence, Italy. And when I was there, I said whoever I was going to marry, I was going to bring there and propose to them there. So I brought my now wife on a Euro trip. We went to London, Paris, and ended in Florence, where I proposed to her. So yes, that is the most romantic thing that I've done.
Wow, that is that's got me beat, because I did the most romantic thing for my wife last weekend. It was our 11th wedding anniversary, and I took her to the live drafts for the Scott Fish Bowl in Charlotte.
I'm JJ, and over the last couple of years, I've been doing everything I can to be a best ball bro. And last season, things finally fell into place. I got 40th in the DraftKings Millie contest, taking home $20,000. Maybe I became a best ball bro, but I'm still looking to learn more about this game. And I still want others to come on this ride with me. So even if you consider me a best ball bro, this could be your year. This could be the year that you officially become a best ball bro. This episode is sponsored by DraftKings. We've partnered up with DraftKings again this year for Best Ball, and we've got a can't-miss offer on their biggest Best Ball contest ever. $20 million in total prizes. It's draft one, get one. Draft your team once, no weekly lineup management, and your top scorers start automatically each week, all season long. Download the DraftKings Daily Fantasy app and sign up with promo code LATEROUND. Enter a lineup in the $20 million Best Ball contest for $25 and get a bonus ticket for a second entry. 2 shots at the title. Draft one, get one, only on DraftKings. The crown is yours. Welcome into another episode of Becoming a Best Ball Bro. I'm JJ Zacharyson, and joined as always by Rich Ryan. Rich, what's going on, man?
Doing good, man. You buried the lead. You went to a barcade after you played video games with your wife.
Look, to be fair, it was not only the Scott Fish Bowl that I went to with my wife. I went to the Charlotte event. Scott was actually there, so I got to hang out with him for a little bit, which was one of the main reasons that I went. You know, I got to say hi to my guy. And then, yeah, we went to a barcade after, which was a lot of fun. And then we went to dinner. I mean, it wasn't just like a, you know, just a one and done thing. That would have been pretty bad if I just went to the Scott Fish Bowl live event, hung out there for 2 hours, and then just went home.
What did you order a cookout? Is that a Hush Puppies or?
yeah. No, went to cook. We went to a great taco place. Actually, it was
nice.
Delicious. Yeah. Nice little hole in the wall type place. But yeah, man, it was a great day celebrating. It was also like, you know, 11 years is very random. Like, it's not like we went to Charleston last summer for our 10th anniversary. But you know, 11 is just another year. You know, I celebrate my anniversary every day with my wife. Isn't that right? Isn't that how we say it?
Yes.
Yeah. Anyway, I'm in the middle of updating rankings. So by the time this comes out, hopefully those rankings are updated on lateround.com. I do it every month for like Dynasty. And then now that it's July, we'll have like a weekly cadence and stuff for season long. And I've been updating the season long ones periodically, whatever. But, and you know, in the midst of it all, I'm trying to finish this draft guide. But the rankings stuff got me thinking a little bit about rankings for best ball, because I get people all the time asking for rankings in best ball. And I want to ask you, Rich, as someone who, you know, you're not necessarily going to draft 200 teams or anything like that, but you know, you'll draft a decent number, you know, probably you are sort of like the demographic of this show in a way.
Yeah, and the people listening. I'm the extension of the audience. Yeah.
Right, exactly. So I want to ask you, like, how important do you think rankings are? Like, do you look at rankings as this thing that you've got to follow when you're drafting, given the amount of volume that you're playing?
So to me, they kind of feel like the U theory in auction drafts, in that I feel like rankings are important at the beginning of the draft, and I think they're important at the end of draft to kind of select players that are relevant and are not going to give you zeros. But in that middle part of the draft where you're filling out your stacks and you're also reacting to the draft room you are in and what is falling to you, I feel like a lot of it is just about intuition and playing the game, right? If you are just a slave to these linear Excel sheets that are telling you a list of players in order, then I think you're going to be doing yourself a disservice as opposed to doing what's most optimal in that draft slot at that time. And that's really what makes this game really fun, is that there is so much depth to these picks that we're making in straddling the micro ecosystem we're battling in the draft room, but also the macro ecosystem of the entire prize pool and trying to score the most points in week 17. And I think you have to be reactionary and make picks based on who you've selected previously and who the people around you are selecting.
Yeah, like I think that being a common theme throughout the draft guide every year, and it's no different this year, is just about being reactive to what's going on in your draft and understanding where there's like pockets of value and stuff within your draft. But I think that it's even a bigger deal in best ball than it is in your regular season long league, because in best ball you're doing more structurally than you would be doing in your regular season long league. You can realistically just pick whoever you think is the best value in season long and go along with it, and you're good to go. But in best ball, you can't necessarily do that. And there's some examples that I want to get to in a second. But I find myself sorting by ADP far more frequently than I'm sorting by ranking. Now, I will say, maybe people are asking for rankings simply because they want to see who I might be higher or lower on, and within my rankings, which I think is a fair thing to wonder and to see. And hopefully that's the main gist of it and like the main reason for it. But generally speaking, if you're doing 50 plus, 100 plus drafts, right, you're not going to want to really just be picking off what you think is the best value at that time based on your own rankings. You're going to want to pick off what the best value is by what the market is generally giving you, right? And what ADP generally says. And then on top of that, you want to look at what's going on within your draft, and you want to build structurally, right? Like you said, like if you want to see that I like Amon-Ra St. Brown more than Jonathan Taylor, or that I don't even think that you would be able to see this necessarily, but I've taken Ashton Genty over Jonathan Taylor at times throughout, this month. And so, you can't really see that because I don't think it's ranked that way necessarily, but tier wise, it would be. But I don't think that rankings are necessarily going to help you out the way that you think it might help you out, because really what best ball is understanding things that from a bird's eye view, a high level, and then being reactionary to what the draft is giving you. Let me give you an example, because there was a live stream that was going on earlier today on the Late Round YouTube channel, where in that draft, so we've talked about quarterback basically every episode of the show, because I think it's the biggest storyline of what's different, or what, we started to see it last year. I remember we talked about it, like the way that the QB2s were creeping up pretty consistently, but we're seeing it just full blown this year, just happening every single draft. And so in this draft that I was doing, I loved the team that I drafted, by the way. If you want to go look at it, we're recording this June 30th. So it was on June 30th that I drafted this team. And I started with Bijan. And then in round 2, I had Nico. And then in round 3, I got George Pickens. Round 4 was Terry McLaurin. Round 5 was Jalen Waddle. And then in round 6 and 7, I double tapped running back and got Ramondre and Jalen Warren, who are two of my favorite, middle round running backs if you are going hero or zero RB. I like both those guys.
You'd agree the inflection point pretty much of your entire draft was the Waddle pick, right? Knowing that you weren't going to pick for another, 20 some slots. Your entire draft pivoted on that wide receiver selection. Yeah,
because I could have gotten David Montgomery was available, for instance, and I could have gotten David Montgomery to pair him with Nico Collins. I just don't really care for, I think he's more of the traditional dead zone back than anything else. So I'm underweight, and I will be underweight more than likely with David Montgomery. But so I'm sitting there, and after I made the pick of Jalen Warren, I knew that in the next round, we'll see what quarterback falls. We'll see what the landscape kind of looks like. But one of the ways that you can sort of see the direction that the quarterback board might go is if there are other teams in your league that have drafted multiple quarterbacks in those earlier rounds. Because what that means is that there's going to be fewer quarterbacks available for other teams to draft. And when there's fewer quarterbacks for other teams to draft, that means that they're going to be very needy and they're going to push quarterbacks up the board more than likely, right? And so I looked, and before my late 8th round pick, my 8-11 pick, I had seen that there was a team that already had 3 quarterbacks, and there was a team that already had 2 quarterbacks through their 8 picks. And because of that, I knew that I probably had to reach, right? That's the reactive piece to what I'm talking about here, where if you were to look at my rankings, you're probably not getting a quarterback in either of those next spots, right? Either of the late round 8, early round 9 spots. So I took Jackson Dart because he was one of those quarterbacks that you could draft naked, right? And then you also have to worry about then what I'll just say are naked quarterbacks, right? The guys that people will draft when they don't have pass catchers already because they know they can get pass catchers late. Like Dak Prescott, he's not really one that you draft naked that people don't draft. I mean, you're going to get crazy people all the time in these drafts where they're just like, sure, I'll draft Dak Prescott after, in the 4th round, whenever I don't even have CeeDee Lamb or George Pickens. But, generally speaking, the team that drafts Dak Prescott's going to have either CeeDee Lamb or George Pickens. And because his ADP is where it's at, it doesn't really stray away because you're afraid that the other team's going to do it. So it doesn't really stray away from ADP that frequently. With that being said, there are a lot of quarterbacks like Jackson Dart that you don't need Malik Neighbors to get Jackson Dart because you get Isaiah Likely, you get a lot of, pick your poison, with any of the wide receivers that you could get late. I ended up getting Darnell Mooney in this draft. Theo Johnson, I think, is still an interesting 20th round dart if you want to go that direction. So you don't need a pass catcher for Jackson Dart. So I took Jackson Dart at 8-11, a little bit ahead of ADP. And then in the next round, I said to myself, I know I'm not going to be able to get a stackable quarterback in the 10th round if I don't just do it right now. And so I took Bo Nix, and I took Nix, 15 spots ahead of ADP in total, like a round ahead of ADP. And do I feel like amazing about it? No, not necessarily from like a clear CLV perspective. I don't think that I'm going to look back at this draft and say, man, I got a great value with Bo Nix because he's going to rise so much over the next couple of months. I think Bo Nix is undervalued. I'll say that. But I drafted him because I had Jalen Waddle, and Jaden Daniels was already gone. I had Terry McLaurin. I wasn't going to draft CJ Stroud there to complete that stack. And so, and Dak Prescott had already been drafted. And so my logic was, I'm reading the board. I'm seeing that there are already teams with 3 quarterbacks. Chances are, if I don't take one right here, when my pick is coming back, there is at least a chance that I'm not going to have a legitimate shot at a good quarterback here, right? Now, I think in hindsight and looking at it, I was probably both right and wrong. Like, it wasn't as extreme as it could have been, but it wasn't, there was like a Baker type quarterback that was available. And then I did get CJ Stroud. He fell a little bit a couple rounds later. But regardless, I think that's one of the main reasons to me that rankings really don't matter as much as you might think in best ball, where you really have to be super reactive. Rankings to me are far more important and logical in a season long league where you're not structurally drafting, where, the supply of certain positions literally does not dry up, like you're not drafting 30 quarterbacks in your regular season long league. So you don't have to worry about that wall happening at quarterback and really straying away from what your rankings are saying. And tight end, same deal, right? It's just, you're drafting way more of those players in these drafts, and then you can't use the waiver wire. Whereas if you're in your season long league and you just screw up at quarterback and you're like, oh man, I just completely forgot to draft one, and it's round 15. Not only could you maybe still get like a Tyler Shuck this year, in some leagues, but on top of that, it's okay. Like you can look at a week 1 matchup and see who the Steelers are playing or who the Jets are playing or whomever, and maybe use a Rodgers or I don't know the week 1 schedule enough right now, or and say to yourself, I could use them in week 1 and I can start streaming. So this is the main reason, in my opinion, that you don't need to be super strict with rankings in best ball.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there. First, the direct example of linear rankings not being so important is Brock Purdy was ranked ahead of Jackson Dart when you made the Jackson Dart selection. But
yes,
Ayuk, who knows, off the board. Pearsall off the board. Kittle off the board. What's the point of taking a naked Brock Purdy, right? So that is one part where you're deviating from linear rankings there and taking the naked quarterback who has more stackable pieces that we can draft later. And then the Bo Nix piece, on top of everything of what you said, this is something you've talked about for such a long time, is opportunity cost. And we know that while more important in best ball because we can't take zeros, the opportunity cost of 15 selections in rounds 9 and 10 is not the same as 15 selections earlier in the draft. So taking some flex worthy, let's hope, cross our fingers player at that spot, as opposed to getting a stackable quarterback with a wide receiver that you made probably the most pivotal selection in your draft on, right? You made a bet that Jalen Waddle is going to have a good year. Stacking him with that quarterback just makes sense in this game environment.
The chat graded that draft between like 7 to 8.5 or so. I always have chat. If you guys haven't caught the live streams before, I always have chat graded out of 10, whatever my draft did, or, how I performed and what they think of the draft. I thought it was like I love that team when I walked away. I didn't get crazy ADP value throughout that draft, but I just like the way that it was constructed. I like the individual players that I drafted, and it came together, in my opinion, from the standpoint of like just general best ball team construction, right? And I think part of that was my willingness to draft Bo Nix where I drafted him. I think we get really bogged down and caught up in this idea that you have to, because it's true, like better CLV teams and better teams that have good ADP value will perform better than teams that don't, right? And so I think that we get caught up in that sometimes and think that like every single pick has to be a crazy ADP value, but it goes back to the very first episode of the show, or maybe the second episode of the show, a couple years ago, when Pat Kerrane was talking about Joe Burrow versus Jalen Hurts. And there are times where you take Burrow over Hurts when you have a team that you are stacking Jamar Chase and T. Higgins, right? Where you have to do what's best for your individual team and pass up on that value. For instance, when I drafted Bo Nix, Jaden Reed was still on the board. I like Jaden Reed. I think that he's a fun pick. I'm not like unbelievably overweight, but I certainly am investing in the Green Bay offense, and I like Reed as a player. And he was a value based on ADP at that pick. But I knew what I needed to do for my individual team. And when you look back on your draft, you can say to yourself, oh man, because I knew that Jordan Love was going to get drafted, right? Like I was going to be able to get Jaden Reed and then stack him because Jordan Love was because of the way that quarterbacks were falling. And so if you do what's best for your team, obviously don't stray too far away from ADP. That's not what I'm saying, because you can get other ADP values elsewhere. If it's one pick, it's not that big of a deal. I made the comment on stream where a couple rounds later, because I got Isaiah Likely then in the 10th, I had to reach a little bit for him. And then in the 11th, I got Romeo Doubs. I'm not a big Romeo Doubs guy. It's just he's a bring back for the Denver game, right? Yeah. For week 17. And I had Ramondre. So I like to at least stack one week 17 game like heavily, even if I just get one bring back for another game, whatever. But this one I got 2 New England Patriots. I had 4 Denver Broncos in the end. When I drafted Romeo Doubs, my example was, okay, look, I could have had Jaden Reed and then risked it at quarterback in some way and not had Bo Nix, right? The trade-off then became, I still got Romeo Doubs as my wide receiver 5 instead of Jaden Reed as my wide receiver 5. And straight up, I like Jaden Reed more than Romeo Doubs. Don't get me wrong. But in a best ball environment, okay, number one, Romeo Doubs has a chance to just be better than Jaden Reed this year. That's certainly in his range of outcomes. I think that what would we put it at? Like 60-40, 65-35, something like that. Like if that, I mean, some people are probably screaming saying, no, Jaden Reed's a slot guy and he's not going to be on the field enough, right? And so let's just say it's 65-35. But in best ball, you're also looking at when these spiked weeks are hypothetically happening and the importance of when they happen. And for that individual team, Romeo Doubs straight up might even just make more sense than Jaden Reed, like in a vacuum, like without even factoring in cost. And so when you put all of that together from a structural drafting standpoint, it did make a lot of sense to get Bo Nix and start that stack and then get Romeo Doubs and kind of go from there. So overall, I'm very happy with how that ended up working out, but I think it just plays in this idea that rankings are probably a little bit overrated in best ball.
By the way, I said Brandon Ayuk. I meant obviously Mike Evans. And you now have a 4-player game stack as opposed to just Jaden Reed hanging out by himself in week 17.
Although to be fair, technically I had Nico, so there was you had at least a little mini one going on with that.
Yeah, and the to your point about the quote unquote reaching there would have been taking CJ Stroud because you took Nico earlier, right?
Yeah,
that would have been a true reach.
Like I think with quarterback, if you are at risk, if there is more than like a 50% chance or even like 30% chance that quarterback is not going to make it back to you on your next pick, then you can make the pick, like that's sort of the way that I think that. Whereas like with CJ Stroud, there was about a 95% chance he was going to make it back. And he made it back plus some, because I didn't even take him the next 2 picks, and then I got him the next one for my third quarterback. So yeah, I thought that example, played into the rankings discussion, and is also a way for me to say, hey guys, go to lateround.com and check out the rankings,
Well done.
Anyway, we have a guest today, Nez. Nez takes on Twitter, part of the Badge Bros. He's a big best ball player. He's also a Pittsburgh Pirates fan. So, he's a man after my heart. We are struggling these days as Pirate fans. It is not the easiest way to live. It's one of the worst bullpens I've ever seen in my life, but I digress. I had a great conversation with Nez. We talked about his most common builds on DraftKings this year, early round fades that he's had. He has a really, really fun take that I agree with. Injured players and how he kind of attacks injured players, and so much more. So without further ado, here is my conversation with Nez. All right, Nez, my first question for you. What's been the most common build for you this year over on DraftKings?
Yeah, right now it's been, and this kind of hurts me because I am like a contrarian by nature, but I am doing a lot of hyperfragile, the 4 to 5 running back builds right now. It just makes so much sense in the current meta to do that. And especially on DraftKings, a PPR website where you can really just backfill those wide receiver spots with volume and just, get lucky, catch one of these guys on a game where they catch a touchdown. It just makes so much more sense than taking bets on those late round running backs that really need contingency value to pay off for the most part. I mean, maybe some of these guys have their own standalone role that we haven't really seen yet. There's some rookies, there's Marshawn Lloyd back there, but really, really feel more comfortable drafting the wide receivers late and tight ends late, as opposed to the running backs. But I would love for it to be a 0 RB year because everybody's convinced that it's not. It's just pretty hard to do so right now, but I'm still trying.
That's how I feel too. Like, I'm still throwing out some 0 RB teams because I don't want to miss it. Because like realistically, I've been doing a lot of research for my draft guide. The last 2 years at running back have been sort of the most predictive years that we've seen at the position over the last like 15 years. Like, it's been very, very strong. Whether that's due to injury, but I also think like the NFL meta is playing into that a little bit with just it being more run, because it's also been the most run heavy years over that time frame as well, which kind of like allows for, yes, like there might not be as much target share going to running backs because it's feeding into tight ends, but they at least are seeing more work on the ground to kind of combat that. Whereas wide receiver, they're just not. And so you get sort of like a flatness at wide receiver. And so, yeah, I mean, I'm in the same boat where like, it just, you feel so uncomfortable this year more than ever going 0 RB. And I think maybe the market's a little bit sharper too. Have you noticed that? Like, do you think that the running back market is slightly sharper with like the player takes that we're seeing out there? And just like, like a backfield where you have like a Ramondre and Travion, like 2 guys that are middle round picks. It feels like a Ramondre historically might have been ahead of where Travion's going, but it's just not happening this year.
Yeah, no, I think you absolutely have to admit that the field is getting sharper. As best ball goes on, you are clearly seeing adaptations to the draft boards right now, and that the running backs are a prime example of it. I think guys are very appropriately priced in terms of roles that they have or have had in recent memory, plus factoring in how many high value touches a guy has in an offense and baking in that uncertainty of the situation, like very appropriately, in my opinion. Like that late second round, just loaded with running backs that all have like different forms of upside in terms of touchdown equity versus their role, especially as a pass catcher on DraftKings as well. I think the field's gotten pretty sharp at identifying who the strong running backs are and how to value them appropriately, like across the board.
And it feels like, do you have I mean, I'm sure you have like some like favorites in like the, round 9 to 11 to 12, whatever the case may be, like we'll just dub them like later ish type picks. But at the same time, does it not feel like once those like year 2 guys are off the board, especially in like round 5, like the Tutons, the Travions, if you want to throw them in there, though I've personally been drafting more Ramondre than Travion, but like those types of players, it feels like there's just a big like drop in projected production after those guys. Do you feel that too?
100%. Like you are buying points for sure. Like you're able to buy points at those picks. Is, you know, not like I came up with that term myself, but that's how I think of it, right? When I'm drafting running backs in that range, I know I'm going to get some points from those running backs. Once you get past, and like Alvin Kamara is like shooting up draft boards right now, which like I would agree with. It does sound like he's going to have a good role in that offense, which would be great for PPR. As soon as you get past him, like in round like 14 on, at that point, you're just like buying hope and the hope that like these guys have something that happens to their running mate that allows them to ascend to RB1 status. And there are some decent bets there, some that are certainly better than others that can, I think I have the confidence in them, assuming that strong RB1 role if that situation takes place. But at that point though, like, these guys are not guaranteed to score points. Yeah. And for me, that means something, right? I think there is definitely something to that where, you know, the probabilities are not in your favor for those guys to hit, but we are well aware of the upside if that does take place.
Yeah, 100%. If we're looking at the early rounds, do you have any guys that you've been generally fading this year, or are you sort of like spreading out exposure? Like, I guess you could also talk about how you've approached that historically, because I think a lot of people are always curious about, like, you know, do you want that 4% blanket for everybody, you know, in the first couple of rounds, because it's a more comfortable way to sort of approach things.
Yeah, no, I've always taken a pretty strong stance in the first two rounds of drafts. Last year, just to kind of toot my own horn, pat my back here, I faded Brian Thomas Jr. pretty heavily. I faded Bucky Irving pretty heavily in favor of guys like Derrick Henry and Jonathan Taylor, just thinking like, wow, these guys have like really, really strong profiles as running backs. And I can build out teams that I think give me better expected value than if I, you know, took some of these other risks. This year, I'm doing the same thing. I'm taking some fades here. The two fades that are the strongest for me, and I think this might come off as spicy, is Jonathan Taylor and Saquon Barkley this year. These guys, to me, I think have some concerns, different concerns for each. Saquon, for me, the concern is that explosiveness still there that we saw 2 years ago that really just did not show itself last year? Can we fully put that on the old OC? I'm not entirely convinced, on top of the fact that he's going to lose a lot of these goal line touchdowns. That is so massive that like him compared to Derrick Henry's getting that rock. Yeah. Saquon's not, man. And that to me really, really hurts the ceiling there. And the JT bear case for me is just, are we 100% certain that Daniel Jones can not only come back at full health, but do what he did last year?
Right.
I've been a Daniel Jones defender. I thought that he had some pretty good seasons in New York, but the truth of the matter is that he's pretty inconsistent. And if he can't do what he did last year, it's a cascading effect on that offense. And it starts with Jonathan Taylor's ability to be who he was last year, even though he has obviously such amazing skill and can break long runs, even no matter who's at quarterback. But it's hard to deny that Daniel Jones was a big reason why he was so successful last year.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I mean, you can even look at the splits, right? After Jones went down, it was just disastrous. I mean, everyone who had Jonathan Taylor, they were like, "Oh, I got the league winner," and then it just went to the crapper because the offense just was horrible, right? And that's I definitely more so for me with the Taylor take, the Saquon take. I've still been taking Saquon. I'm not overexposed, but like still drafting him. But the difference too is that like there's a difference in cost. Like even those like 4 or 5 picks is significant, because with Jonathan Taylor, I think Amon-Ra only just started to officially go ahead of him in ADP. Mm-hmm. And to me, like St. Brown, I'm taking him over Jonathan Taylor all day, just based on what his floor ceiling combo looks like. And I mean, he just projects really well. Amon-Ra St. Brown does, but the JT stuff, it's hard for me to really see a significant gap in projection from him to the bottom of that round 2 tier with some of those rounds, like a Derrick Henry, let's say, right? Like, is there truly, JT will probably catch a few more passes and be more of a plus in the passing game. And yes, there's less competition for him on that team, but like realistically, we know Derrick Henry's in the better environment, like locked in better environment. Like you said, you have to play into this Daniel Jones thing a little bit to really buy into Jonathan Taylor. And so to me, it's like that tier almost starts to begin with Jonathan Taylor, and you just don't want to be drafting at the top of that tier in the end.
100%. That's really where I'm at, is like he is sneaky in that tier. And because there's a gap between him and the next RB in that range, it feels like he's not. And it feels like you're supposed to take Jonathan Taylor. Yeah. But in reality, the projections are not that different. And I think that's where stands can really come into play. It's risky, but at the end of the day, like if you're playing DFS, and you have a guy that is more expensive but projects the same as a guy that is cheaper in cost, you're probably going to take the guy that's cheaper in cost.
Exactly.
So you can really make some outsized bets in best ball using those principles, and that's what I like to do. I like to take some risks and flesh things through like that.
Yeah, makes a ton of sense. The other sort of like pocket, we kind of talked about those running backs in that area. The other one of the interesting pockets for me this year, and I'd love to hear your take if you agree or not, but is that like late third, through the fourth round into the early fifth at wide receiver. There's just so many interesting upside profiles there, in my opinion. I've been throwing a lot of darts in there. So my first question about this pocket is, are you attacking wideouts there? And then if you are, which wideouts are you sort of gravitating towards?
Yeah, 100% I am in this range, especially, if you're talking about the 3-4 turn, that's where that pocket of running backs is. So I'm almost certainly making up for wide receiver in that range. My favorites right now is Rashee Rice used to be in that range. That was just a gift, but that's long gone. But my two favorites in that range right now are Zay Flowers and T Higgins. I was never much of a Zay Flowers guy. Last year, the efficiency just shot up like crazy, and I really don't see how that changes much this year. I don't think the target competition around him is very strong, and I think Lamar Jackson's play style has changed, like in Zay Flowers' favor as well, where he's not running as much, and Zay Flowers has been tremendous, and I think that target share really has nowhere to go but up, if not sustain, and if it does sustain, then he pays off price as well. I've just been really impressed with him as a pass catcher. So taking some Zay Flowers, and then T Higgins. I'm so in on this Bengals offense, which does hurt me to say as a Steelers fan. I think that T Higgins is just borderline, or I'll just say straight up underrated as a pass catcher, because we look at the box scores, we look at the historicals, and we're zoomed out big time, and we see the yearly results for T Higgins, and wow, he doesn't have 1,000 yards in the last 2 seasons, and he's just getting mogged by Jamar Chase. But when that team is healthy and clicking, T Higgins has one of the best ceilings, point blank period, week to week, for any wide receiver. And if they can finally click, there's just always something going on with that Bengals. Either T Higgins is hurt or Joe Burrow gets hurt. If that offense clicks and stays healthy, they are going to be a wrecking machine. And T Higgins, I think, has upside for like that Devontae Adams type of season last year, where he's just touchdown after touchdown after touchdown. And that's something that I want a part of.
Doesn't it feel like people don't give T Higgins the benefit of the doubt for contingent upside as well? Like it's like
100%.
There's never discussion about like T Higgins would be seeing 27% of the team's targets if Jamar Chase went down, if not more, right? And like there's really nice contingent upside there too. And then the Zay Flowers thing, I think at this point, given the way that early round 3 looks, because like early round 3 to me is not that much different than like early round 4.
It's not
at this point, right? And so like I think that you could, especially like if we get late in the season, and I want to hear if this is the right game theory, as me being an ascending best ball bro.
Sure.
Right? We can't say that I am officially necessarily, but like from a game theory perspective for me, it feels like maybe don't do it now because, the Millie, obviously we got a month and a half until like things are really closed and settled. But if we get into August and Zay Flowers is still comfortably almost every draft going late third or mid to late third, it feels like he would be the kind of player to take in the early third to differentiate your lineup a little bit, because there really isn't that dramatic of a gap, in my opinion, between him and, I mean, look, I published Market Score, new metric for late round, and one of his top comps is JSN's 2025. And I'm like, I don't want to miss out on this. I wasn't in on Zay last year, similar to you. And like, I do think that like the way that people look at his end of season numbers, maybe a little bit skewed just because it happened late when we weren't even using him. I think it was like a week 18 game where he like went bonkers, but obviously the Lamar Jackson injury happened, and he's been more of that like floor play than ceiling play, but we've seen the ceiling, and there's a new offensive coordinator, and there's all these like factors where you can tell a story of him like having a pretty sick season. And in my opinion, in that early third, if he does stay back, right, in that late third range, and then we get into August and he's still there, that's a way to differentiate your builds to say, oh, I'm getting Derrick Henry at the 210. I can stack that. And then even get Lamar. Lamar goes late fifth often, which is crazy to me.
Yeah.
And so you can get him in the early fifth easily and just stack the entire team.
Yeah, no, you're spot on. And I think people hear what you're saying and think about beating the field in that regard. Like, oh, like I'm going to have unique Gibbs and Bijan combos. And while that's true, I think it's more so important for like a personal portfolio standpoint. Like you don't want all of your best premium picks to be paired with the same players over and over and over. Yeah. And if we think that projection is flat for those wide receivers, you should absolutely pull him up. I've done that. I've already begun doing stuff like that with Zay Flowers. He's just so set up to smash. I love the JSN comp for the market score just because he has such an outsized like shot of just dominating targets in that offense. There's very little threat to him as a pass catcher.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. And then in that range though, too, this is where I've struggled a lot because I really like Luther Burden. I'll take some swings at Colston Loveland at times. I really like Jalen Waddle and Terry McLaurin. Like there's so many good wide and like the market score stuff loves Tedero McMillan. I'm still a little bit worried about like situation and stuff like that, but like I don't want to completely ignore what market score is saying about him, but there's so many talented wide receivers in that range. And what I've noticed from a portfolio standpoint is that now it just naturally fades the running backs there, the Travis Etienne's, the Javonte Williams, Cam Scadaboo. So how are you handling that? Like, how are you handling those guys? Are you just like, if you're going heavy wide receiver there, are you just comfortable with being underweight on those running backs, or are you still attacking those running backs?
I am quite comfortable fading Etienne and Javonte Williams. I think there's big systemic risk in New Orleans. And I say that as somebody that really came around on Tyler Shuck and think that he is good, but I am well aware of the outcomes that he might have tricked me. And he might not actually be good. Yeah. And what if Jordan Tyson can't stay healthy? What if Chris Olave has another, there's a lot of fragility in that offense that I think would really cascade and have pretty strong effects. On top of the fact that Alvin Kamara is likely to stay and take that pass catching role from ETN. That was what made him so valuable last year. And is ETN, he's fine, but is he a slam dunk? Whereas like some of these wide receivers are, to me, no. And Javonte, shout out to Javonte last year, really made me look like a fool. Had to draft Miles Sanders, couldn't draft Javonte. I'm not drafting Javonte again at these prices. He signed a big contract, but he needs such a large workload, in my opinion, to pay off. And I don't know necessarily that is sustainable for him. He's been injured a lot in his career. So I'm totally fine with fading Javonte. There could be some other running backs emerging in that offense as well. But Cam Scadaboo, I not fading, sir. Yeah. Absolutely no shot am I fading Cam Scadaboo. And it's not 100% because of the backflip, but the backflip did a lot for me. The backflip did a lot for me. That is a lot of force on that leg. And that was really all I needed to see. I don't think there's an outsized bet like Cam Scadaboo in that range. Like David Montgomery, I don't think has Cam Scadaboo upside. Yeah. Josh Jacobs does not have Cam Scadaboo upside. He has such the perfect blend of high value touches that he can just dominate fantasy. Yes. He can catch, he can get 80 targets. He can run for 10 touchdowns. That is such a ridiculous profile that if he wasn't injured, we're taking Cam Scadaboo in the second round. And I feel like uber confident in that.
Yeah, I would agree. That is the one. And not only that, he just checks a lot of like the market trend boxes that I've studied, historically, of guys who smash ADP and do really well against ADP expectation. And like year two backs in general are really good bets, right? Mm-hmm. And then he's got a great pass catching profile. And that's the thing that I think people don't fully understand about him, is that like even him as a prospect coming out, like the problem for him was, does he have the burst? Does he have the long speed to be able to generate big plays? The answer to that is actually no. Like he didn't even show that last year, right? Sure. But it didn't matter. Like if he can gain, 5 to 6 yards and get these 10-yard chunks every now and again, that's fine. And then also like Tyrone Tracy being back there, and I was a Tracy truther when he came out, but I have to be honest, like he has not been an efficient pass catcher at the NFL level, right? And so there's a very real chance that Scadaboo, like you said, is taking those high value touches. And I've been clicking he is the one running back, even because I've mostly faded David Montgomery too. Like I find David Montgomery and Javonte Williams to be kind of traditional dead zone backs. If we were to reference like what that, the dead zone's kind of just an archetype zone at the end of the day, but like they're the guys that you're buying into just based on projected volume. Like it's not like Javonte Williams wasn't just bad as a receiver last year. He was horrific as a receiver last year. Like
so bad,
like so bad. And it scares me that they're already, I'm not saying that Jaden Blue himself is going to be standalone value type guy, but I do think that he could play a Justice Hill type role on that team. And if that's the case, that lowers Javonte Williams' ceiling. And then all of a sudden on a full PPR site, you're not getting as much of that receiving work, but then you're also just banking on touchdowns and banking on him having another, like at his price, you would need probably like realistically like a 12, 13 touchdown season, I think, for him to really pay off.
Exactly. He's being drafted very close to his ceiling in terms of the workload that he needs to receive. And I just don't think he has the skill to absolutely like command that workload. He needs things to happen to his run. Like Jaden Blue just has to be atrocious like he was last year to do that. But Jaden Blue, year 2 guy, maybe he's got, a little more maturity about him, another year in the building. Yeah, I just don't like the Javonte bet.
And I also like we sit here in late June and we are talking about Jaden Blue in that way, right? And like we sit here and like there's definitely tons of people listening to this right now that are saying, oh, you're really not going to draft Javonte Williams because of Jaden Blue? Or you really? Yeah. But guys, like historically, this is the game. Like it's a lot easier to make the case with like David Montgomery because Woody Marks at least showed us something last year. At least, I mean, he wasn't like phenomenal, but he at least like was able to command some volume and do something, right, as a rookie. And I understand that you look at like the Dallas Cowboys depth chart and you're like, well, what could change? Like what could go wrong? Well, number one, we'll see what happens with any sort of guys that gets cut or if they want to make a move or something like that. But also this is exactly what gets you into a trap often with these running backs is that you're going off a projected volume. And of course, some of them could hit, like Javonte Williams might hit. I'm not saying that it's guaranteed.
Right.
But like, that's the kind of player that generally, 7 times out of 10, if you want to play probability, will burn you, know, because you're getting them off. I feel that way. I probably have drafted more Javonte actually than Travis Etienne, if I'm being honest, which is kind of wild because I think that the Etienne bull case is a little bit easier to make. But the thing that has gotten me is Alvin Kamara. Like if he's there, he's not going to do nothing. And I think Etienne belongs like a round later. I think Javonte belongs like a round later than where they're being drafted right now. And those wide receivers just make it so much easier to take the wideouts,
Yeah, very, very well said.
All right, so we have Scadaboo, who you're into, right? Coming off that pretty rough injury. Quinshot Judkins is also coming off of an injury. And we could even let's throw Malik Neighbors in there as well as just this general, like, how do you approach injuries? Is it a blanket thing that you sort of go by and you say, I'm not drafting these dudes because I don't want to deal with them being banged up? And I know, or is it just case by case with these dudes?
Yeah, it's case by case for sure. It's because of how different the situations are. Like Malik Neighbors is such its own thing and its own beast. Yeah. And I'm not drafting Malik Neighbors. I am of the belief that he will end up on PUP and miss the first 4 games of the season. And if we get, depending on when we get that news, I will take the discounted shares when that news hits because it will definitely affect the price.
Right.
And if I'm wrong, all right, I'm wrong on Malik Neighbors and he looks good in camp or is not going to open up on PUP. The rosiest scenario you can paint about Malik Neighbors, how high does he rise?
Yeah, I've thought that too. Yeah. Also, doesn't it feel like the wideouts that you would be taking where he's going right now could easily just be 80%, 90% of what Malik Neighbors would generate anyway?
100%. I mean, Malik Neighbors, we love him as a talent. There's a lot going on here that is scary. And it could take a while to come on. And maybe he goes OBJ mode when he comes back and we're just like, oh, shit, like, here we go. But no, I'm waiting to take those bites at Neighbors. But Judkins, I'm not so worried about the injury. It's just, wow, this offense and this team could be very bad. Yeah. This is somebody that I think thrives on positive game script because he has Sampson in the backfield that's doing that pass catching work. Could they surprise us? Could, Watson have a good season with these pass catchers like around him and he's, at least competent enough that they can score touchdowns? I suppose, maybe any quarterback in that backfield could do that. But I have a lot of trouble taking Judkins over somebody like Tootin, somebody like Henderson. Yeah, I'm not drafting Judkins, but that's more so of the situation and the profile as opposed to like his injury.
Yeah, I would agree with the Judkins take. Like the one time that I've gotten him is that sometimes he'll fall to the early 6th, and that's when I'm like, I'm like, okay, well, all those guys are gone, and now the opportunity cost is maybe a Jags wide out or something like that, but I can get exposure to those guys in other drafts. So like I'll get some, but I would guess my Judkins exposure is going to be in like the 3% range by the end of the season, the off season. So I'm definitely with you. And I also look at things in more of a case by case with these injuries. One really interesting thing that I want to pick your brain on is quarterback ADP and what it's doing there, where some of these QB2s are seeing this uptick in cost. But do you think that there's a reason for this? Like, is there something that you can point to say this is why we're seeing like, CJ Stroud go only a couple rounds sometimes after like Brock Purdy, who we know, is in a good environment, produces, et cetera, et cetera?
Yeah, I think it's a bit of like a rising tide effect with quarterback, where the quarterback run starts and drafters on DraftKings just do not want to be left with a bad quarterback. So they run to the podium and draft these guys. As soon as that big window starts, it just doesn't stop until they're all gone. And I get it. When you're at that range, there is a better chance of somebody like CJ Stroud hitting your lineup than Travis Hunter in that range. So like there is that safety element that people naturally lean towards. And there's also just a lot of really good data out there right now that is very, very, very hard to ignore that says 3 quarterbacks is a profitable strategy and it earns you money more often than taking 2 quarterbacks does in this current landscape. So I think that has just kind of bled over, and DraftKings is really just kind of taking that to the next level over here, where everybody's just going early and often. But it's I think it's correct. I think it's just smart.
Yeah. So here's the thing though, like, are you in those, like, given the environment, given like you've done so many drafts, what a typical draft sort of like how it goes.
Yeah.
Does that make you then, because like I feel gross when I skip over a quarterback in round 9 or 10, right? Yeah. And I'm like, oh, I got to get, I don't know, Kenneth Gainwell or someone random like that, right? Yeah. And then I look back and I'm like, why did I do that? When clearly a Brock Purdy outcome is going to be better than from just the majority of the time. It's going to look better, especially like Bryce Young, like it's crazy to me that there are times where you are forced to make those decisions and having to choose a Brock or a Bryce Young type player in like round 12, because if you don't, there's going to be crazy drafters around you that are going to take them in that range. So you're almost, to your point, forced to do that. Now, are you playing into that when that happens because you have to play into that? Or are you just like the majority of the time just trying to get ahead of that in your drafts and just get those like, round 6 to round 9 quarterbacks to make sure you at least have some substance there?
Yeah, no, I certainly play ball with the field and do my fair share of 3 quarterback drafting, but I'm not shy about doing 2 quarterbacks. They just have to be good. Yeah, I can't do good and okay. They have to be good, where I'm not worried about bench risk at all, no matter what happens, and just leaning into those guys being good and hopefully, well stacked. So that way the bet on those 2 quarterbacks makes sense. But no, I am doing a 3 quarterback thing. And there's times where, in on my way to getting my 3rd quarterback, I'll have my 2nd quarterback before I even have my flex player. You just have to do these sort of things on DraftKings with the scoring system and the ADPs. So yeah, I play ball with the field, man.
But let me ask you this. Let me go through a little exercise here. And this is something that was not, show sheet related, but I think it's an interesting thing to exercise to walk through given this quarterback landscape. So let's assume that you got Jalen Hurts as your QB1. Okay. I mean, I love Jalen Hurts. I think that he's underpriced this year, but let's just say that you got Jalen Hurts as your QB1. Okay. And then I want to ask you different quarterbacks and for you to say if you would stop at 2 quarterbacks and be comfortable with that, or if you would need a 3rd. Okay.
Nice. Okay.
So we'll start easy. Okay. We'll go Jalen Hurts as 1 and and Trevor Lawrence as your 2. Would you be comfortable stopping there?
Yeah, easy to.
Okay. How about Jalen Hurts and Jackson Dart?
Is
it partially a Jackson Dart take for you?
Yeah,
too?
It's a Jackson Dart thing because I am just kind of worried about that New York Giants offense. So I'll say 3.
Okay. How about Brock Purdy as the other one?
2.
How about Bo Nix as the other one?
2.
He seems really underpriced, by the way. Bo Nix.
Bo Nix is a stud. The Broncos are going to rock.
Yeah, it's crazy that. How about Kyler as your 2?
3.
3, and then since we talked about it, how about Tyler Shuck as your 2? Would you need 3 there?
That's going to be a 3 for me. I love Shuck, but I can't act like it's a slam dunk.
And then we'll go 2 more: Jordan Love and then Baker Mayfield.
Jordan Love, I would go 2.
Okay.
I would take the 2 risk on Love, and then Baker, I'd go 3.
Okay, I think that's fair. We're pretty aligned with a lot of that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's a really interesting conversation because I had Liam on, and Liam is a very much a 2 quarterback guy. Like he is very, but again, I think his point was very reasonable, saying that 3 quarterbacks will probably help you advance, but 2 quarterbacks might be able to help you maybe in the playoffs a little bit more, just based on the fact that you would get that additional flex. I personally, anecdotally, like I went heavy 3 last year, and I had the most success that I've had in best ball. So. I'm probably like I stick to 3 90 to 90, like 90% of the time probably. But yeah, I think it's a really interesting conversation to just generally have. Let's go to tight end. Are you more of an elite tight end guy, or are you a late round tight end guy?
I mean, neither really. I love the middle range of tight ends, starting with Tucker Kraft. He has a chance to be my highest drafted player this best ball season. Does Tucker Kraft. Love the way that he's trending off his injury, and the moves that they made in Green Bay to me signal so much confidence in Tucker Kraft being like an engine in that offense, because Christian Watson doesn't handle a lot of volume. Maybe he will this year. I think he's a fun bet. Jaden Reed doesn't play 50% of snaps. And then Matthew Golden, boy, hope he's okay.
Might be bad.
could be a terrible pick. Wasn't a good prospect. Maybe he's not good at football.
Right.
And then enter Tucker Kraft, who was just a monster last year when he was healthy. Just like I said, the way that he's trending off this injury has me very confident in him. I'll still do 3 tight ends when I draft Tucker Kraft because it's a PPR site. You can flex one of those guys, and that range is just so solid. But that Tucker Kraft, Laporta, Fannin, Pitts range, I just that is the sweet spot for me.
Do you have any late round guys that you've targeted?
Yeah, two guys that I targeted. One, Mount Washington, Darnell Washington for the Steelers. Okay. Very, very into him. This is a hot take, but I think there's a chance that he plays a decent amount in 11 personnel for the Steelers, where if you have Darnell Washington out in 11, you have 3 out wide, obviously, it doesn't necessarily signal a pass, because he's another lineman,
right,
but he has pass catching chops as well. I would not be shocked if he kind of steals some of Freiermuth's lunch there in that offense. And then the other guy that I like is Theo Johnson. I think Theo Johnson's out at the wayside right now. He was a decent prospect out of Penn State. I liked him a lot last year and really kind of burned me. I mean, as much as an 18th round tight end can burn you last year, but he's last round right now because Isaiah Likely's there. Good receiver, Isaiah Likely.
Yeah.
But is he enough to totally dust Theo Johnson? Is this offense going to run, one tight end sets all that often? I don't know. That's not the way the NFL is trending. So I think Theo Johnson's a decent shot for a tight end in the last round. I
love that call out. I mean, I think both are really, really important to what the current meta is in the NFL too, right? Like I've kind of railed against this throughout the offseason, but the way that even the way that the Jags and Gladstone talked about the heavy personnel usage across the league kind of annoyed me post draft, because he was basically just saying this is the way teams are doing things, therefore we're going to do things this way too. And drafting the tight ends that they drafted, and obviously reaching for one that was more of a blocker, in round 2 and such. And the real, I think, benefit of being heavy is the versatility of what these tight ends can do, right? That's the important part. This is why the Rams can do it.
Yes.
They have guys and this is why I think Terrence Ferguson's interesting, because he's someone who can literally line up out wide and play that role and be like a Darren Waller type. But then they also have a Colby Parkinson who's more of like the traditional tight end. Max Clare is sort of a more traditional tight end type player. Who, I mean, he's a good prospect, but like more in like not the Terrence Ferguson, athleticism side of things.
Right.
And so, like, I think they were just looking like long term, like, oh, Max Clare and Terrence Ferguson together is actually an awesome pairing, right?
Mm-hmm.
You can be really interesting with them and be versatile with them. Whereas you don't just like, it's not just like, let's just throw tight ends out there. And then you have to look at personnel, which is why I think the Theo Johnson thing makes a lot of sense. It's like, we don't know for sure what Isaiah Likely is. I'm still drafting some Likely, don't get me wrong, but like Theo Johnson could easily just be very involved in this offense when you look at the remaining pass catchers on that team, especially if Malik Neighbors is banged up. Like,
yeah,
it's rough.
I can really see a path to Theo Johnson mattering, given all those factors.
Yeah. All right. Last thing before I let you go, I do this with everybody. Give me a hot take, a bold take for this 2026 best ball or NFL season.
Yeah, this is sort of a bummer, man. And I kind of touched on this a lot, is that I think a lot of these offenses that people are painting with, rose colored outlooks, I think are just not going to pay off. So I'm really worried about the Colts. They have a lot of expensive pieces. I'm worried about the Saints. They have a lot of expensive pieces. And I just really think that these offenses have a chance to fail, and they're just very fragile, and that's not fun. But I think that is something that I think we're going to see. And then a more happy, like, oh, here's what could happen is I think the Cardinals, I think, just could be a good offense. There's a chance that the Cardinals team isn't good, but the sum of their parts is so strong. What if they're just good? What if they just score a bunch of points and they are just the dream fantasy matchup week in, week out, because they can put up points. They can't stop points being put up. And then it turns out Jeremiah Love was a smash. Marvin Harrison breaks out in year 3 because, oh, wow, he was a great prospect. I guess we should have just took him at his cheapest price. And then just one last rose colored one. JSN, I think, could absolutely repeat what he did last year and end up as wide receiver 1. In the event that the Seahawks defense takes a step back, and they don't really have that much of a run game at the moment with Price, the rookie, and Halani and Emmanuel Wilson there. What if they just throw more? They didn't throw a lot last year, but they were incredibly efficient. If they throw more and JSN is still this efficient receiver, he could have a bonkers season. So,
yeah. I like that. Market Score really. So, I mean, spoiler for anyone who's getting the draft guide, but Market Score actually has Puka and JSN ahead of Jamar Chase right now. It just like the inputs that go into that, like it just likes, part of it is like, teammate competition and stuff like that, but like it just likes them more. And the JSN thing that I've been toying with as well is exactly what you said. Like, we know statistically that hyper efficient defenses regress year over year. Like it just happens all the time. And, assuming that the Seahawks are going to be as dominant, like they're going to be really good still, but like as dominant defensively, it's probably not the strongest bet to make. And so, leaning into JSN then makes sense, obviously.
Yeah. So had to finish with some good news as far as like what I think, but those are my hot takes.
I love it. All right, man. This was awesome. Love. This is actually, like we were saying before the show, this is our first time potting together and doing a show together, which is great.
Yeah. No, looking forward to this for a while.
Couple of Pirates fans just trying to get through right now.
Yeah, I mean, pray for us. Pray for us. We're going through it weekend, night in, night out. Could be the best night of our lives. Could be the worst night of our lives. Just depends on what happened.
All the time. Let everyone know where they can find you, what you're working on, and all that good stuff.
Yeah, thanks, man. I am Nez Takes on X. I am talking about the Pirates a lot. I'm also talking about fantasy football a lot. I cover all the sports. So if you are somebody that likes sports, you will find a ton of takes from me over on X. And then on YouTube, I stream every single day. John Warner and I, aka Roto Run on YouTube. Find us at the Badge Bros. Again, talking every sport. We do cover football. So obviously it's a football show. You can find us over there doing some best ball drafts over there every day on YouTube. JJ, thanks so much, dude. This is a blast.
Of course. I love both of you guys. You guys do awesome work. So I couldn't recommend you guys more. And of course, everybody, make sure you are checking out lateround.com. The draft guide will be live by the time you listen to this, basically 10 days, which is frightening for me, but it'll be joyous for you. Go check that out, lateround.com, pre-order it. Make sure you subscribe. Check out the YouTube channel, youtube.com/@lateroundff. But otherwise, everyone, thanks for tuning in.
This is an iHeart podcast. Guaranteed human.